let's go ahead and kick off. I'm Jessica Lindl. I run education and social impact at Unity Technologies. I'm really thrilled to be in the moderator seat here today with this incredible panel that I can rarely get on the phone, let alone all of us together. So it's great to be collaborating and having a conversation with all of you. The general overview of our conversation is we're going to spend about a third of our time, I should say a fourth of our time, because we're going to try and make some time for Q&A. A fourth of our time talking about where have we been in the games and learning space, where are we today for that second part, where are we going for the third part, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. I'll also just do some level setting in the introduction. For those of you who are not aware of the incredible trajectory that the gaming industry has had over the last 20 years, it's gone from about a $10 billion industry to a $200 billion industry in 20 years. It's bigger than the size of film, music, and streaming combined. And the learning games opportunities, I think, have also exploded and really broadened in impact and growth. In addition to that, gamers today, about 70% of adults play games regularly, and about 90% of kids play games regularly. So it's a medium that I don't think we no longer need to think of as, you know, just a couple of kids in a basement who are grinding on a game. It's really everywhere and expansive in the impact that it has. So I'm going to go ahead and ask all of you to introduce yourselves and just give a little bit about why you're excited about the work you do and what brought you into it. Go ahead, Steve.
So my name is Steve Isaacs. I'm the education program manager at Epic Games. I was a classroom teacher for almost 30 years and was very involved in game-based learning and ed tech, and was working with certain companies like Minecraft, the education team, and then ultimately got my students involved in Fortnite Creative and got connected with Epic, and was brought on as their education program manager, where I focus on secondary education and supporting teachers and students in adopting our tools in the classroom. This is a space that I've lived in for the last 30 years. I'm super excited about the growth. I'm excited about finally coming into our own a little bit. We've spent a lot of years, kind of being very far on the outskirts of the mainstream, and I think we have some tools and opportunities, and the people on this panel represent that beautifully for students, moving forward and bringing us into the future.
I'm Adam Seldow. I was a teacher in Boston Public Schools a long time ago and a tech director in school districts for a while, always with the responsibility of bringing stuff to students at scale, technologies that I think today are finally at the point where they do actually scale and do some interesting things. So what makes me most excited about working at Roblox now as the partnerships lead is that we do see lots and lots of kids gaming, as we always have, but now they're gaming together. They're representing themselves with avatars in unique and interesting ways, and they're discovering and creating all types of content, and this is just about any kid. So that's really exciting to me.
Cool. Hi, I'm Liam, co-founder of ClassDojo. We're a platform for lots of things, classroom tools, communication, and we reach tens of millions of parents, kids, and students all over the world. I'm kind of here, I suppose, because for the last couple of years we've been working on a project that is creating a 3D virtual world for kids to learn in, which kind of uniquely they can only play with their classmates that they know from school in real life who have parents on the platform. So it's kind of a very safe environment. I'm personally very excited because I think gaming kind of got me into what I'm doing now. I used to be a fairly disengaged student, and then around the age of 11, 12, I started trying to make games really, really badly. And that kind of drove all my learning and kind of reinvigorated my interest. So finding out that I could make things, took me from being a kid who didn't care about math to a kid who saw the utility and saw what all that was for, along with lots of other subjects. So I think that experience could be brought to a lot of kids, and that's kind of, I think, what drives my interest in this area. So.
And I'm Matt, and I'm here in part because of people like your story. So I'd spent about the past 12 years focused on digital equity in emerging markets, solving device and internet access. And as we were doing that, we were building an operating system, and I was just curious with like these amazing engineers who could build an operating system, how did they learn to code? And it turns out that like the most common answer by far, which turns out is the same way that Elon Musk and Zuckerberg learned to code, was the way that you did, which is hacking their games. And at the same time, we would be deploying these kind of honestly not great Linux games, but they were like these math games into rural communities in places like Guatemala, where 72% of the math teachers cannot pass the math exam they're supposed to teach to. And you'd walk into a classroom full of kids that were like shouting numbers at each other because they were so excited by the games that they were playing. And so we went on a journey to understand how can games be used to teach there and here. And what we realized is that the power of making is actually more powerful than the power of playing. The two have very important roles, but what we realized was that, the way I think about it is that if every kid in the world could use Unity, then it would mean that every kid in the world could make software. And if every kid in the world can make software, that will unlock opportunities in their lives that they just right now don't have. And the second is I believe that the downstream implications of every kid knowing how to make software are as unimaginable and potentially larger than the impact of AI right now. In other words, if you said AI versus every kid in the world having the power of software, which one's going to have a bigger impact in the world, I'd argue that it's debatable which one is going to be larger, which I think is saying a lot. So our goal is to kind of unlock at Endless Studios, unlock the power of community and community game making to teach kids how to build on tools like Unity.
Thanks to all of you. So a little bit of a history lesson in where we've been, and oftentimes where we've been is learned through the mistakes that we've made. So I'm curious, what do you think we did wrong, or where do you think we went wrong in the last couple of decades in games and learning, and what did we learn as a result of that? I'll pick on you, Steve, because you did say 30 years.
Yeah, I guess I have those 30 years. Gosh. So what have we done wrong? I'd say, well, a number of things. One is, I think when we started this shift, and it wasn't quite 30 years ago, it was about maybe 10, 15 years ago, when teachers started considering adopting certain tools, what they did was they thought they were the ones who were supposed to create content. So especially, I think back to the early days of Minecraft in education, and not that this is a bad thing. We had some teachers making amazing experiences for students. Like the World of Humanities was this massive Minecraft world, wonderful. But that was how we were seeing the integration of a tool like Minecraft at first. And then once we kind of shifted the narrative and started to, like Matt was saying, realize the power of students as creators, everything shifted. And it also supported adoption so much because now we're in a position where, students often bring their expertise into the classroom. We can leverage that. We can, work from their strengths and their interest. So again, not to say that there was anything wrong with that, and I think we're even shifting to a point where we're gonna see some more of these interesting, experiences created by others, but I think putting that power in students' hands is maybe where we went from learning from our mistakes initially. And then we also had a really lot of bad educational games over the years, I'm sorry to say. And I won't name names, because I don't know who's in the audience. But honestly, we've come around from, I think we've learned that the importance is if we're going to use a game for learning, the learning has to come from the engagement in the gameplay, and the gameplay has to match the learning objectives and not, we navigate through letters to spell a word and then get an opportunity to shoot something that has nothing to do with what we were just doing, that kind of thing.
So really, the first one is we focused on the teacher. We should have been focusing on the learners. And then sort of this gamification, extrinsic reward was not necessarily the right design path. Thank you. Anybody else want to jump in?
I do, because I find it so funny. If you roll back to like the beginning of gaming, some of the most successful consumer games in history were also some of the most educational games. Like you look at SimCity, you look at Oregon Trail, you look at Civilization. Like these are incredibly engaging games that are some of the most successful games in that early era, and they were teaching you so much about history and about how to, like complex systems with SimCity and how to build urban planning. And then somewhere along the way, the consumer game industry went from what you were describing before, 10 billion to 200 billion. The dollars that poured into it, skyrocketed, and the education industry tied to gaming kind of lagged behind. And we can go into why that might be, the distribution, the dollars that it takes to build these games, building for the classroom, having teachers build rather than gamers build those games. So there are, I think, a lot of reasons why that's the case. But I think, I talk a lot about, if you do look at the history, if you look at the beginning, they really were one and the same in those early days, in so many cases.
Yeah, divided too quickly. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I'm guilty of as a teacher, and I think I see this still today with a lot of teachers, is games, by and large, are still viewed as distractions by a number of teachers, right? They don't belong in the classroom. They don't teach our kids anything. They distract them from what I'm trying to do, which is impart upon you something. When in fact, games, electronic or not, board games, have so many innate values that teach kids so much about cooperation, failure. What a great way to learn how to fail gracefully and try again, perseverance, grit. All of these wonderful things that are very hard to measure and frankly very hard to teach are part of games. And so I think we're hopefully getting to a point where we're able to realize the value generally among a lot of teachers because we'll have a lot more examples.
So really the competencies that we're focusing on are the ones that games do a unique job of driving impact on. Yeah, thanks. Liam?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the sort of really early period of games was actually pretty great. If you look at what changed in that evolution, one, as you mentioned, there's sort of the cost to make a good game, became millions and then tens of millions over time. But I think the common factor in a lot of the games that you referenced there and some of those early ones is that they're sort of like simulations that aren't where you're experimenting with a complex system in some way and seeing what the result is. So that's SimCity, for example. And I think that's really great as sort of almost a method of practice. Like if we think about what we teach, say history, then a series of events is one way of thinking about that, of facts. But that's not really what history is. It's really like how one event led to another, what the motivations of the people were. And so it's really not the nodes of history, it's the edges and how one thing, how the system works. And I think games can allow you to explore those systems and really build an intuition which leads to mastery. But that changed, and I think that partly changed because, one, we wanted to make educational games as cheaply as possible, and a lot of the talent was kind of being hoovered up by the entertainment side of things. And two, possibly, and maybe this is controversial, but deciding that they were educational games, and so we needed to hit certain outcomes for that game. So the game needs to teach you this kind of math. And my point about those complex systems thing, if I force you to say, what is this teaching? What is SimCity? What is the outcome? It's hard to say, but it's definitely teaching a lot of understanding of how, a complex system can, of cause and effect, and of those edges, not of the nodes. And I think we started to push for games to be obvious to the people funding them that they were teaching this node or that node, rather than, just building your intuition for how systems work or things work or math works or history works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really helpful. So then bringing us to where we are today, I would love it if each of you could just spend a little bit of time talking about your current business model and sort of how you're tackling up-leveling learning through a gaming approach. Matt, we're going to start with you on the end.
So our model is to get them to build. And I think where you're seeing gaming converge now, if you look at kind of the biggest games on the planet, right, Fortnite and Roblox and Minecraft, like where are they all converging? They're all converging into creation. Like it's like I have a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old at home, and they are making sandblocks. They're playing with Legos, and you see that, for me, my Legos of today is, I build businesses. I like doing that. It's fun. It's creative. We're all creative as humans. And giving kids the most powerful tools, games and game engines of today are the most powerful tools in the world, basically, to imagine anything and manifest them. And you see the success and the engagement, the success of doing that and the engagement that you see in these games. And so I think that the way to do that is to teach that. What we're trying to do is basically say, how do you teach real tools? So how do you teach Unity? How do you teach Blender? How do you teach GitHub? How do you get kids into real software so that they can kind of climb what we call the S-curve to pro and be ready to be out, in the working world, comfortable with these tools, learning them at a young age. And so, we have kind of scaffolded moments along each of the points along that curve, but the core of it is basically, it's like, GitHub for games. Get kids together, building games together, whether it's a big game they want to be part of as a community game, or just them and their friends building games, and and then maybe inviting someone from outside in to build together, and then providing mentorship and scaffolding and tools and resources to teach them along that journey. And then from a business model perspective, we're stealing a page out of the free-to-play model, which is we want to make this accessible to every human on the planet. And free-to-play, I think the numbers are something like 70% of mobile game revenue is coming in from free games. How does that make sense? Well, the answer is you can come in and then you pay for what you want along the way, and usually you can earn the currency inside, or you can buy the currency inside to get anything you want in that ecosystem. And so we think about our business model in a similar way, which is make it so anyone can come in and people can earn the things that they need to climb through the ecosystem, to get anything in the ecosystem, or others will choose to pay with cash to get that same currency, and that allows us to democratize it.
And Liam, you've got a free-to-play model with a
sort of.
twist.
Yeah, so ClassDojo is free for schools and teachers and districts, and we basically have kind of some optional features that parents can buy, because we have all those millions of parents, and so a percentage of those buy that, and that kind of funds the whole thing. And so that allows us to, there are lots of schools, and especially globally schools, where you'll have no parent in that school paying, which is fine. They all get the same features, but that's working really well, and that was sort of a challenge we set ourselves early on, that we wanted the core school and classroom product and most of the parent features to be free as well. At some points that was hard to stick to, and it's tempting to just charge districts, but I think it worked out really well. I think a big I love the Andy Warhol quote about a Coke being the same, like the president drinks the same Coke that you drink, and you can't buy a better Coke. And that's sort of always what I wanted to apply to education, and I think software provides that ability. The stuff that's gated and can be very inequitable is the services, who the teachers are, whether you have access to a certain institution. But I think software has the ability to be, the best version is just as accessible to this person as that person. Mm-hmm. So that's at least what I hope. It's idealistic, but.
And I know you've got a new platform under development too. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier, the kind of basically a virtual learning space, a 3D space for kids around a classroom. And I guess in common with a lot of other folks here, that is very focused on creation. I think it starts with the creator. I would push back a little bit on the teacher side, and I'm probably going to bring in the magic AI word at this point as well. But I do think teachers are incredibly creative at creating resources and stuff like that. And teachers know how to, for example, use Google Slides. They do that all day long, and they can make tons of great activities. And they're also great game designers. They design activities for their classroom. But I think creating their own actual games to achieve that sort of complex system thing I was talking about earlier, that's been a bit, the complexity of doing that has been too high. So the same way that I think we can put it into the hands of students, I think if creating a simulation or interactive learning experience for a teacher was as easy as using Google Slides, I think there'd be a huge amount of innovation there. And then if they can, perhaps that's only 5% of teachers that invest all that time, but that can kind of be shared and remixed and tweaked by all the other teachers out there. So it's early days, but that's some of what's like in the vision of what we're building here.
So a new creator platform.
Yeah.
Adam, what about you?
Roblox is a user-generated content 3D immersive platform, which means that a lot of people can build, and there's a lot of games on it made by those people. In the education part of Roblox, what we're doing is again, investing in creators by working with some of the best content providers out there to bring standards-aligned, academically rigorous content onto the platform through exemplary models. And so we want really good stuff built that's standards-aligned and rigorous as good examples of what people can build on it. And in addition to game-based learning, so games, also game-based assessments, which is really interesting, and a topic I'll get into in a little bit, and why I'm probably sitting here. But the game part, one great example is Project Lead the Way, and Jason's here, the leader of this whole project. They have a biomedical curriculum as part of, and they're known for their engineering and biomedical curriculum in many, many school districts throughout the US. And they wanted to extend their curriculum with a game, go deeper into a narrow area, and they came up with Pathogen Patrol. So it's this game where you are trying to kill pathogens and you're a white blood cell of some sort. And it's a lot of fun, but when you go in it, you're like actually learning the science. You are doing the anatomically correct things to kill pathogens. When you go around, you are seeing the inside of an arterial wall and capillaries and all that stuff that I don't fully understand, but I'm getting better at because I'm playing the game. And so we're funding in some cases and working with these partners to bring these as exemplars onto the platform. Another interesting example, and one of the reasons that I alluded to earlier that I came to Roblox is that when I was a student growing up and even into graduate school and everything, I had pretty severe test anxiety, as many of us do. It's not that I didn't know the content or wasn't smart. I didn't feel that smart, but I just clammed up around tests and never really did that well. And I started reading when I was in graduate school about stealth-based assessment or stealth assessment, which is basically assessing somebody but they don't know they're being tested, taking the anxiety piece out of it, at least I thought at the time, and I thought that would be really amazing. But in practice, it was nearly impossible to build. To stealth assess somebody, you have to have telemetry data that's captured. You have to have pretty advanced statistical models. You have to make sure it's reliable and valid, just like you would any assessment. And it was really complex. And so the first research I read about this was from Val Shute with Plants and Zombies, and it was a really cool experiment, random controlled trial where they showed a significant difference in game-based assessment versus more traditional assessment. And Roblox actually acquired this company called Embellis, started by Rebecca Cantor. And this company, just as the pandemic hit, was almost ready to land the contract in Massachusetts to do game-based assessment for science, for the whole state. And then the pandemic hit, fast forward a little bit, all states stopped testing, right? And so Roblox said, ooh, here's an opportunity to scoop that up. So Roblox acquired Embellis, the company that did game-based assessment, because it solved one big problem that Roblox had. And this is fascinating. Roblox has, it's not a terrible problem, they have thousands and thousands of engineers who apply to Roblox every year who are fresh out of college. And that's tough to hire, right? To go through all of those applications, all of those resumes. And Roblox probably defaulted to what a lot of us would do. We look for college names and other things that are badges. And some of the diamonds in the rough were probably passed over or looked over. And so Embellis brought their game-based assessment in, and we're measuring some of the tasks that they identified were important, some of the skills that were important for engineers at Roblox that met the cultural requirements and everything else. And they ran all of these new college grad engineers through this assessment, whittled down the tens of thousands of applicants to a manageable number, and noticed all the ancillary benefits, such as now they have a lot of students who are from community colleges, from other places, non-brand name schools, if you will. And the diversity increased, the equity and the opportunity to get a job at Roblox increased, and all this is because they were doing stealth assessment. So that's kind of what I hope to see more of in the gaming industry, really innovative ways to use games to either help assess or learn skills.
So on our side, Unreal Engine is an industry standard. It's a game engine, but it's used across so many different industries right now. So there's been wide adoption in film and television, automotive, advertising, fashion, and a lot of other industries. So our feeling is we want to kind of build this player to creator pathway, and we want to help kids get the skills to perhaps get these industry jobs. So sometimes that's a matter of preparing them for an alternate pathway where maybe if they're not going to go to a four-year college, they still have these skills and can enter the workforce. And of course, if they're going to go to a four-year college, these are still wonderful skills to have. So our strategy, especially on my team, has been to make the tools more accessible to teachers, to create resources that help the onboarding process. There's a lot of educators are intimidated about the idea of bringing a tool like Unreal Engine into the classroom. So we've created a lot of great resources that allow them to essentially support the students as much more of a support or a guide than someone who has to stand in front of the room and teach everything about our engine. And we have a lot of career-oriented courses, like we have a series called Unreal Futures, Careers in Real Time, where there are a number of videos that share about what it's like in that industry. So one of them, Careers in Animation, students hear from professionals at Disney and RealFX and about how they got into that industry and how this technology is transforming that. And then the kids get to go through a 5-lesson video-based course on creating their first keyframe animations in Unreal Engine, which is terrific because they're learning like this much of the engine, but it's enough that they actually get a feel for what different roles people that have careers using this technology have. Somebody who's going to become an animator doesn't have to know everything about Unreal Engine. They don't have to know about all the coding and all of that. So, that's sort of been our approach, and we do a lot of training for educators. Our tools, there's no licensing fee. Technically, somebody who makes their first once they make their first $1 million on something they publish with Unreal Engine, that's when they enter a licensing agreement. I still can't wait till the first high school student has to wrestle with that horrible challenge. And then we have other, all these other avenues to support teachers and students. The resources are at no charge. So we're trying to feed, not people to work at Epic, but to feed the industries that we, support. So, hopefully we're making a really big impact. And, high school, we've only been working with secondary for about 2-3 years. So it's great to, be able to support educators in the adoption in that way.
Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing with Fortnite?
Yeah, I meant to say thank you for the prompt. So anybody ever hear of Fortnite? Okay. Has anybody actually seen Unreal Editor for Fortnite? Yeah? So we are super, super excited about Unreal Editor for Fortnite. This also brings me back. When I was in the classroom, I was having my kids use Fortnite Creative to create content, and then my goal was have them learn that, which is made in Unreal Engine, and the goal was to get them up to Unreal Engine, but the gap was huge, and there was nothing in between, and I feel like it was a gift from the heavens when Unreal Editor came out, because it's exactly what I needed when I was in the classroom. It's getting kids into Unreal Editor, so Unreal Engine essentially, so they're working in the engine, they're creating content, they have access to all of the Fortnite assets, but they could bring in anything. So you could bring in 3D scanned items, you could bring in items from Quixel Mega Scans, all these different great assets, and once you hit launch session, it pushes your creation from Unreal Engine right to Fortnite and opens up Fortnite with your map. So we're starting to see now that people can create content for Fortnite that might not look anything like Fortnite. We have an amazing ancient Egypt experience that was created by a developer, a creative creator group, and we're seeing a lot of other things like that. So it's going to open up so much both for developers to create content, whether it be for brands or for education, but also from my vantage point, the opportunity it creates for students to get into this ecosystem is just tremendous. So thank you for that question.
So I think what we've heard on where we are today is that, 10, 15 years ago, it was thinking about gaming as almost ed tech applications. What we learned was that the focus on the competencies we wanted to teach were critical, because otherwise we were just being redundant, or even much poorer than existing mediums or educators out there. Now we're in the mode of moving from player to creator or learner to creator to career readiness and career readiness skills that are taught as a creator. So the next question is, where are we going? Of course, generative AI and large language models, I'm sure, have something to do with our answers. But we'll do reverse order, Steve. Where do you think we're heading next?
So, I mean, generative AI, and gosh, I didn't know this conference was going to be the AI conference, but I guess it makes sense. The one thing I'm gathering is well, for one, the potential for, and I keep hearing it over and over here, is using AI as an assistant. I love that idea. I love the idea of AI supporting a learner to be more efficient, as well as supporting whether it be a developer or anybody in these spaces. We could go into all the questions and have a huge debate over AI, but I think from that standpoint, it's really incredible. I think we're also moving to a place where, we talk a lot about and throw the term metaverse around, where a ways away, but I think what we're starting to see, and this is what's great about like Roblox and Unity and Minecraft, we're creating these like metaverse experiences. So kids, and this brings me back to kids again, are seeing what that is and they're experiencing that. They're the ones to go see Travis Scott in concert in Fortnite, So I think that's why I love what we're doing, all of us, is, I want the kids who know this space to be the ones creating it. So, when we fast forward 10 years and we actually have this interoperable metaverse thing, our students are the ones that are going to build it.
We'll try a minute or less for the next.
Similarly, I think the future hopefully holds more ways for students to express themselves. So the portfolio type of assignments that we do now, where we draw a poster or we build something, I think that building can include games moving forward. And also, I think we're going to see hopefully more ways for students to express themselves in these various metaverse situations and be who they want to be at that moment and change it often.
Probably going to join on the creator train here as well. Another thing about the 90s, I think, if you look at what things were like then and how kids interacted with computing then, home computers were really expensive, so were nowhere near as ubiquitous as mobile devices. But the platforms and games were all very hackable, moddable. You could change a game, in many cases. And there was sort of a pathway into actually developing deeper technical skills and other things like that. I think the last decade, well, 15 years maybe, has kind of been very bad for that. It's been very good for device equity because so many more kids actually have access to a device. So I think that story about that being the equity issue is a little dated at this point. But that device that they're using, a tablet, is basically a consumption device where, when Steve Jobs said that a computer is a bicycle for the mind, the tablet kind of isn't. It's more of a car or something, because it takes you there for, you don't have to do any work. So I'm kind of excited about a lot of these platforms that we're talking about opening that pathway back up again, because I think the tablets sort of brought it to a lot of people, but unless you have access to the more complex devices, this is a consumption device and that's a creation one. So I want to provide that sort of creation pathway to more kids again, and I think that would sort of unify the two ideas.
I love the bike car metaphor. It's so apt.
Just sit back. And
Yeah. So the best engineer we ever hired didn't have a high school degree. And I think if you look at, very just briefly, he was kind of this star in the Linux world. Red Hat hired him without a high school degree, and we were lucky to get him from Red Hat. And if you look at the future of education needs to match to the future of jobs. And what is the future of jobs? It's people making things, and it's people knowing how to use the tools of making. And when I say that, I don't just mean software engineering. I mean design. I mean project management. I mean taking things to market. I mean digital art. Everything that goes into making. I know, how do you collaborate? How do you work together on complex projects where you've got artists and architects and, how does that come together? And that is the present of work. It's not even the future of work. The future of work will be things like AI and using those tools. And I think that the future of education, or the present of education, needs to embrace that that is the present of work, and needs to give youth an opportunity, starting from a young age all the way through their employment, needs to give youth an opportunity to put that to work on real projects that look like real work. And so when I think about AI, for all of its scariness and all of its blessings, and both of those are realities, I think that there are really hard questions being asked about what does AI mean, what does ChatGPT mean for the classroom. But I know what it means for me for work, right? Like the game design document that I wrote on my way over here that's going to turn into a game on ChatGPT because I wrote a paragraph and it's a GDD and the team's now working on it. Like that doesn't happen. I'm the most powerful I've ever been because I have that. So the way someone put it the other day is that we're not going to be replaced by AI. We're going to be replaced by people who know how to use AI. And so the working world judges us by our outputs, not by our inputs. And AI is the greatest tool for our outputs. And so I think that we need opportunities that allow us to learn how to use, it's not just about AI, it's about using all of the tools at our disposal, whether it's Unity or Unreal or Blender or GitHub. And kind of just one last point I wanted to make, because I just think it puts it poetically. You were describing how they learn this much. This much is the hardest part, because these things feel like Medusas of snakes, scary tools, and then when you get in there, they're so much easier than people realize, right? It's like Final Cut Pro looks really intimidating, and then you use iMovie and you realize it's not that hard, and then you go to Final Cut Pro and you kind of know how to use those things. It's not really that hard. You just have to know which of the 1,000 buttons to click on, and then all of a sudden you're an explorer. And so we've seen so many cases of like teams working together, and the engineer is working with the artist. The artist's never opened this tool before, and the engineer says, "Oh, come in, let me show you how to do this." And next thing you know, the artist realizes that they can make things happen with code that they didn't know that they could make happen, and they want to learn how to code because they want to do their art. And so I remember, just a month ago, I was in the UAE, and there was a team of 3 game makers, 1 guy, 2 women. The guy was the engineer, kind of classic gender divide. And he just kind of offhandedly mentioned, "Oh yeah, and I had to teach them GitHub so they can contribute this and ... You had to teach them GitHub? And it was like a blink of an eye. And so I think that the opportunity to help youth through something that engages them as much as I get to build a game, and I get to do it with my friends, and I get to realize in the process of doing that these tools aren't that scary, and the things I want to do are best manifested with these incredibly powerful tools. I think that is the best way to prepare youth for the future of jobs.
All right, thank you. I'm actually going to add in to my own question, which I haven't done. And my hope is that all of these new technologies, again, we can learn from our past mistakes and just really increase the diversity and inclusivity. So this panel looks a little bit different in 10 or 20 years from now. Any questions from the audience? Yes.
Thank you. It's been a fascinating panel. I'm a game designer, and I also teach at Stanford Graduate School of Education. So I really concentrated on engagement and motivation and how it leads to learning. And the panel noted, and I've also observed that a lot of the gamified learning is really heading towards extrinsic rewards and motivation. And you hinted at it a little bit, but how do you think that games and gamified learning can really drive towards intrinsic motivation that leads to better learning?
I want to hear from Jessica, because you should be on this side.
I was amazed that you pulled out the Val Shoot Plants vs. Zombies research paper. And so I do think this is one of the lessons that I learned and made a lot of mistakes in. And given your background, I think bringing together the professional game designer with the professional assessment designer and learning designer is really where you can unlock within the game mechanic the intrinsic motivation. Yeah, that'd be my 2 cents. Yeah, go ahead.
Currently working on my dissertation for the impact of AR and VR for students with intellectual disabilities and learning life and occupational skills. And so listening to all of you, I'm like, that's great. That's fantastic for our regular ed students, for the typical students, but intellectual disabilities. And I'm looking at, I have a son with Down syndrome. He wants to be a fireman. And I know in virtual reality, he could learn to do that. But I'm not seeing a lot of content out there for folks
I guess in a sense, hopefully we're training the people that will be developing those tools, I'd like to think. I don't know, like in other words, but I do think from a social impact standpoint, there's so much value in creating opportunities for students to create apps and games with a purpose, so I think you have a great point there.
And we have a bunch at Unity that are made on Unity. We don't develop them, but we just launched the Unity for Humanity winners, 500 submissions, 8 winners, and a few of them are actually focused on differences. So I'll send them, find me afterwards.
I'll add one more thing there, because we actually ran a wonderful program with ASU for neurodivergent youth, and we had similar questions. How would that go? So autistic children, would they be able to work collaboratively building these? And the parents coming out of it were saying, I've never seen my children so engaged. One parent had 2 autistic children, 18 years old, and said, I've never seen anything like it before, because they want to engage, they want to build, they want to play, and then that becomes the impetus for them to want to collaborate and for them to also then want to share because they're so excited about it.
I think we're going to get the buzz in 26 seconds, so I'll just go to the far back, and we'll see if we can answer it that quickly. Go ahead.
I'm curious, in the adult space, upskilling, reskilling, workforce, what are you seeing so far? What are you thinking about?
We do a lot in that space in terms of, we have a fellowship program that's for people in arts, media, and entertainment that is a 3-week intensive course that helps them upskill for career growth.
All right, thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciated the conversation. Thanks to our panel.